Hello everyone, welcome back to the final recap of my KWCC Summer Quick event. This was a rapid tournament. It was CFC rated, and again, like I mentioned in previous videos, not too sure which rating not too sure which rating this will be rated under for my CFC, either 1110, my actual rapid of CFC rating, or 1872, which is the USCF over the board tournament I have, USCF over the board rating I have, which I disclosed to the tournament director, so that they can use it for tournament pairings. So this round 5 game, in fact, it was a wild game. Very crazy, in fact, over the board, as well as in other aspects, not only on the chessboard itself, but also in other aspects, which I'll talk about. So in this game, so keep in mind, I'm 3 out of 4. I'm playing white, and I'm actually, in this game, I'm playing a 1752. So a bit of a higher rated opponent, but not the highest rated opponent I've gone up against, so not too worried. So here I'm playing white, and let's take a look at what happened. So d4. We go into a queen's gambit declined. These are just some opening moves, not too much happening here. Here I'll say is probably the first moment where I play a move that kind of deviates from the normal ideas. Here I play bishop to d3. Another move here is queen a4, knight takes d5 is also suggested by the computer. So here's where I started to deviate a little bit. My idea here was that here I have a massive center. I can play e4 at some point and claim over the whole center, and this will be very good for me. For example, in an ideal scenario, maybe something like this where I have the full center. These two pawns are a little bit weak after castles, knight c6, and breaking the rooks in. They could get attacked. In fact, this is actually a bit worse for me, but practically speaking, this is just to show that I can get a massive pawn center. So instead, after b takes c3, here my opponent plays c5. If I take, then this is positionally not great for me. I have this really weak random c3 pawn here just by itself, and I have to spend my entire game protecting it. So here I just simply castle. My idea is that, of course, if you take, this is honestly good for me. Now I have a really nice pawn chain. Your knight's still undeveloped. My bishop is already out and about. Could play rook c1, get the open file, etc. So here instead, my opponent castles as well. I play queen e2, rook to d8. I play rook to d1, defending this pawn a little bit more just in case. Knight to c6, and here this is more of a little bit of a positional battle. Here I knew my opponent's idea was probably to play e4, e5 at some point to soften up my center even more. Try to at least. And after the move e5, what I had prepared is something like d5. The idea is that, let's say, well, currently it is my move, bishop to c2, which is what I played. So let's say I play some random move just to demonstrate. I can play e5 here because, let's say, rook takes d5, then I have bishop takes h2, and I can win this rook. Although it isn't great for me, which I calculated, because then there is something like e4 forking my two pieces, and this is actually not the best for me. Here I play bishop to c2, rook to d7, rook to d7, and here I calculated a really wild idea. Here I calculated that if my opponent plays e5, I can play d5, and here if my opponent continues with e4, counterattacking my knight. Here I have d takes on c6. This is completely winning for me. I calculated this, and this actually took me a while to calculate because I had to make sure this was completely winning. The idea here is that if you play e takes on f3, looking to attack my queen, obviously my queen is of higher priority than this rook as well as this bishop, so I should take back with the queen, of course. But no, there's actually a better move here, which I calculated, which is the move rook takes on d7. The idea here is, even though you can take on e2, and it looks like I can't play rook takes on e7 because there is rook takes on d1, I actually have a different move. Here I completely move rook takes on d8. The idea here is I take advantage of the fact that there is a back rank weakness, and the best move you have is queen f8, and I can play rook takes on f8, king takes on f8, and after a move like rook e1, actually there is a better move here, I can play c takes on b7. After c takes on b7, this pawn cannot be stopped. Alternatively, if you take here, thinking you got a queen, I can play bishop takes on d1. This pawn cannot be stopped, and I'm getting a queen, and I'm up a queen and a bishop. So I calculated this variation, and I really hope my opponent would miscalculate something there, and I would be able to take advantage. Unfortunately, my opponent didn't play e5. Here my opponent just played a6, trying to get in b5. Here I play a4, stopping that idea. And here my opponent plays knight a7. Keep in mind, due to the idea I mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time calculating it just to make sure, because in case my opponent did go for it, I wanted to be sure I was winning. So here at this point, I was down to around 2 minutes, we'll say, like around 2 minutes, and my opponent still had loads of time. They still had like around 20 minutes. Also, for some reason, earlier on here, I had around 18 minutes here. For some reason, I spent 8 minutes calculating bishop c2. I'm not too sure why. But we're speeding up here. And then here, after knight a7, again, I calculated for a long time, and there's actually a win for me here, which I saw the first move, but I didn't see the continuation after. The correct move here is knight e5, gives me a +3 advantage. The idea here is I can swing my knight to c4 at some point. Let's say you play rook to d6 to illustrate knight to c4. And if you play rook to c6, protecting this pawn, then I can play d takes on c5. The idea here is if you play rook takes on d2, queen takes on d2, I'm threatening back rank checkmate, and you don't have enough time to take back. If you take, then check. Queen to d1 check, queen f8, and here I have the very stunning move bishop takes h7, deflecting the king away from the defense of the queen, and here I'm completely winning. And alternatively, if you play queen takes, then same story. Here, bishop takes on h7, deflecting the king away. So you don't actually have enough time to take back. And obviously here, if you take back, then I can play rook takes on d8, and I'm completely winning. So here I completely missed this due to low time. So instead, I play d takes on c5, which is actually the second best move. The idea here is either I destroy my opponent's pawn structure, and now they'll have the split a and c as well, or I get to win material. For example, if you take on d2, then after rook takes on d2, you can't take with the queen because then you hang your rook here, and you can take back with the pawn, but then you still get the a and c structure. And here, once again, similar to my idea earlier with the d5 and e4 push, here I calculate after takes. If you play bishop takes on f3, then I do have the nice move rook takes on d7. If you play bishop takes e2, I play rook takes d8, queen f8, rook takes, king takes. And here, there are a lot of moves I can play. In fact, this move I didn't even see, but computer suggests c takes on b6, which is the best move. Idea is there is no way to actively stop this pawn. This is actually a really nasty idea. You can't actually get back in time. Because this knight and pawn configuration, you can play knight to c6, for example, but I can get in rook to d7, and I can actually win a piece here. And of course, if you play bishop takes on d1, here I have the very nice move b takes on a7. I can give away a bishop and a rook, but I get a queen in the end, get this pawn, and then I can promote the a pawn as well. So that's the variation I calculated, but here my opponent just simply takes back. And here I was really low on time. In fact, at this point in the game right here, I have around 30 seconds left. My opponent has around 15 minutes left. So at this point, I'm just blitzing out moves rapidly. Currently, you'll see this a6 pawn is under attack. My opponent plays a5. Here, I just slide my king. These moves are happening instantly. Keep in mind, I have a 10-second delay, which is my clock isn't ticking because I'm playing my moves within the 10 seconds of delay where my time doesn't go down. And here, after all of this thought, getting my king to d3, and my opponent plays king to d6, here I had to come up with the correct game plan. Here I play the move f4, and keep in mind, now at this point, since I've used even more time, now I'm down to only 4 seconds left on my clock. My opponent still has around like 15-ish minutes, 18 to 15 minutes, around there, somewhere on their clock. And at this point, I'm just blitzing out moves. I'm just trying to predict what my opponent is going to play. Also, I should mention, now that I've noticed, here I can play the move bishop to b5, and I'm not worried about my opponent getting this passed pawn because I'm actually within the box. So the box is pretty much how I can figure out if I'm able to stop the pawn in time. Basically, if we take this pawn and we cut it diagonally to my home rank, and we draw a box or like a triangle with this, we can complete it with the box. If my king is within this box, I can stop this pawn. So that's why I had to play king to e2 before I can play bishop to b5. Because earlier in this position, if I had played bishop to b5 here, then after like knight takes, pawn takes, then a4, although this is actually completely winning for me because I do have this pass pawn, which will probably queen quicker. But still, I didn't want to risk this considering how low on the clock I was. So I blitzed all these moves out. And here, at this point, 4 seconds left, I'm just playing as quickly as I can. Here I play f3, knight e7, I predicted. Immediately I blitz out bishop e8. G5. Here I was actually really scared because I didn't know what to do. So the idea I had, of course, firstly looking at pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn, keeping in mind I have really low time. I didn't really like the fact that there was king e5, king f4, and I didn't really think I could win the a5 or c5 pawn as quickly as my opponent could win this f3 and e4 pawn. So here I thought I'd come up with something really clever. Here I play the move king c4. If you take here, then you realize that obviously my opponent can't capture their own pawns, so there's actually no way to sneak in. This pawn perfectly controls the d4 square, so my opponent can't come in. So I thought I was really genius. I thought I was really smart with this move. King to c4. My opponent takes. I play king to b5. Here I'm trying to get this a5 pawn. And here my clock's not ticking at all. I'm playing every single move instantly within 3 to 5 seconds of my delay. F5 simply takes. Knight takes on f5. King takes on a5. Here my opponent jumps in. I thought my opponent's idea was to play knight f1. Knight takes h2. My opponent king to b5, preventing knight to c4. My opponent plays knight to d5, trying to get the knight to c7, forking the king and the bishop. Here I play king to c4. We repeat a little bit. Here my opponent actually offers me a draw. Here my mindset was, okay, I have a pass a pawn. I have chances to push. These pawns are all going to get blockaded. E5, then I have king to d3, king to e4 if I get lucky and my opponent allows me to get in. Here I thought I had chances. You know what? I'm gonna push for the win. King to d3. Here my opponent plays e4, which is actually a blunder. Here I play a5, which is actually a missed win. The correct idea here is to play c4. I didn't consider this move at all because I thought I was just locking in my king's ability to get in. Because here, if the knight moves, I can obviously play king c4, king b5, and help my pawn become a queen. So here I play a5, attacking the knight. Knight to c8, bishop to g6. Here knight a7, and here this was actually one slip up I had. I didn't look at the clock at all for this move. Also keep in mind at this point my opponent from earlier on, after the move bishop to e8, their time from around 18 minutes to this point has ticked down to 2 minutes. They've spent 16 minutes considering these past like 7-8 moves trying to figure out what my game plan is, and at this point we're both really low on time. I'm at 4 seconds here and my opponent here is down to 2 minutes. Here after all of this exchange, after e5, here I didn't look at the clock for one move, and here I almost ran out of time. Here obviously I have the delay, so I do have the 10-second sort of guarantee that I always have 10 seconds. But here I forgot to look at my clock, and I didn't see that my clock was actually running. In fact, I actually luckily played a move after this position, and when I hit the clock, I realized I had 2 seconds left. If I hadn't moved it within another 2 seconds, I would have lost on time. I didn't even notice I was on 2 seconds, which was why this was really nerve-wracking, and I got really lucky here. If I didn't move, then I would have lost on time. So now I'm down to 2 seconds, and here my opponent thought again for quite a while, and my opponent's now down to 50 seconds. Knight a7. Here I play bishop to e4, taking over this long diagonal. My opponent can't get in. I can play a6 to create like a bit of a wall here. Here my opponent keeps using their time. They're down to like 15 seconds. Knight to b4, king to c4. Keep in mind I'm blitzing out my moves. I have 2 seconds left. My opponent now has like 3 seconds. Now has not 3 seconds. Sorry, exaggerating a little bit there. Has like 10 seconds left. Knight a7. Here I play a6, and here my opponent uses a bit more time, and now they're down to 1 second. And here I'm at 2 seconds. My opponent's down to 1 second. And in fact, what's funny about this is the second last game in the round, and everyone is pretty much watching our game. a5. I immediately play a4, blocking the structure. Now my opponent has pretty much no moves. And here my opponent blitzes out knight to c8, and here after king to b5, I won on time. Although this position is still completely winning, although what's funny about here, after king to b5, I stopped completely looking at the position because I already knew I was completely winning and I was going to get my king in. and I was just focused in on my opponent's clock, seeing how much time they had left, seeing if I can call for a win. And thankfully, at this point, my opponent thought for too long and actually ran out of time before they were able to hit the clock. So let's take a look at this final position to better understand how I'm winning. So the idea here is that pretty much my opponent's stuck. They're pretty much in zugzwang. So here, the first thing we'll look at is these two pawns are blockaded by my bishop and my pawn, nicely posted out here. These two pawns are completely blockaded, they can't move. This pawn can't move, but obviously I can take. If this knight, and currently this knight serves a very important job of blocking b6. If you move the knight, then I get king b6, king b7, a7, a8, and I'm going to get a queen. Also, this knight on c8 also protects a7. So if you play knight a7, I can play king to b6, knight c8, king to b7, forcing a pawn through, and this is completely when I'm going to be up a bishop for a pawn. The other idea here, so obviously we can't move the knight because then I get king b6, king b7. If you move your king to c7 to come back to protect, then I play king takes c5. And the time it takes for you to take this pawn, I'm probably going to get these two pawns and this pawn. For example, here, I can play king to c6, king a7, attack this knight. Let's say knight to b6 check, king to e6, king takes. And then here, if you try to loop around to get this pawn, king takes, king here, king takes. I have two pawns and a bishop to cut off the knight, and this should be completely winning. For example, this. And at this point, this is completely winning for me. Just to pull out the example a bit further, so just to demonstrate this is completely winning for me. Any other king move, you would lose this pawn. King to c7 is the best king move you can do because you want to try to get back and stop this pawn. And so at this point, my opponent's out of moves and they're in zugzwang. So like I mentioned, this was a completely wild game. I had 2 seconds left on my clock. My opponent has 1 second left on the clock. Insane game. But in general, afterwards, I analyzed this game. Turns out I should have played f takes on g5 earlier in the position where I had played king to b5 to try to get the pawn, which is earlier right here. Reason being, f takes on g5 instead of king to c4. F takes on g5. Obviously, you have to take back. If you don't take back, then I'm going to get a queen. Say h takes on g5, king to c4, king to e5. Here, I can play king takes on c5. Or I can also play king to b5. Both work. And here, the crucial move I have missed after king to f4 is the best move here is king takes a5 because this pawn is simply getting through. But if I wanted to go for a risk-free approach, I can also play the move bishop to h5, protecting this pawn. And in order to get to the h2 pawn, you have to wrap your king all around because keep in mind, my pawn here forms like a bit of a wall, so my opponent can't actually get in, and they have to loop all the way around in order to get to my h2 pawn or my c3 pawn. But if you get to my c3 pawn, I'm going to just simply take on c5 and protect this pawn, and you're not going to be able to get through. So that's what I figured out in post-game analysis. I had missed the move bishop to h5. But in general, besides from that, I'm still, even though there were a couple of mistakes and a couple of game-changing moments, in fact, there were many moments where I was either better or winning, and I blundered and completely threw it away and made it a draw. But since we're both all on time, we both didn't figure it out. But besides from that, pretty hectic game. Still happy with the fact that my endgame technique, even though it was, in a sense, subpar, I was still able to put some pressure and able to convert this type of a position. And yes, so I actually finished the tournament with 4 out of 5, and I actually got the top under 2,000 prize. I actually split it 4 ways with 3 other people. I still got a bit of money out of it, so still pretty happy with that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the KWCC Summer quick recaps. Finished with a score of 4 out of 5, and we'll see what my actual final rating is. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you all next time.